Hello and welcome to another episode of Zero BS Estate Agency, where we strip back the nonsense and dive into what really works in the world of property sales. Today I'm joined by someone I've admired for a long time, Charlotte Jeffrey-Campbell, founder of Able Agents. Charlotte's been at the front line of agency training for years, helping agents transform from order takers into confident professionals who actually know how to sell. And in this episode, we talk about why education, not gimmicks, is the key to maximising a property's value, and why overvaluing, in Charlotte's opinion, isn't always the villain, and how the art of asking the right questions at the right time changes everything. If you're tired of the same old sales pattern and want to learn how true professionals win trust, generate offers, and get deals over the line, this one's for you. So Charlotte, what is the one thing that truly maximises the value of someone's home when they go to sell their property?
From my perspective, it links to what I do, and it's education and knowledge. Because if they understand the market they're in, they understand the competitive nature of the market they're in, or lack thereof, then that's always going to get them the best price. Because unless you understand the market you're operating in, unless you understand your local market, not just the national market, because loads of sellers think they understand the market because they read the national news, I think that's the key thing. I think maximizes the price. I could say decluttering and all those sorts of things, but actually their knowledge, their education, and our role to educate them is the best possible way of getting the best price.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because one of the things that I really struggled with when I first started doing valuations was I was getting beaten up and spat out by sellers that were just regurgitating what other agents had told them, which is John doesn't know his market. John's trying to sell your house cheap to one of his developer mates. John's trying to make a quick buck. Yeah, John doesn't understand his market. And I was like, oh my God, this seller is about to make, or they have making huge errors and mistakes in giving their property to an agent who hasn't spoken to them about educating them on what the local market's really doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a no-brainer for me, because it's two things. If you are seen as somebody who educates the seller, and you can build up a level of trust, and you can really explain why the fact that there are no other three-bedroom semis detached on your street is a phenomenally brilliant thing, or that there are no other three-bedroom semi-detached available, or there are a million, that's a fundamental difference as to how that sale is going to be approached, isn't it? So, and a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about today is that we need to be seen as experts. We are professionals, and our role is to make sure that we educate our seller or landlord about the market that they operate in. Because if they don't truly understand it, that's what ends up in them believing the overvaluing hype. And we all know the statistics, that if we don't sell our property within X number of days, the value of our price goes down by Y. And I'm not going to quote those because they're all dependent on the area that you operate in. But we know for a fact, if you take too long to sell and you're too greedy, you end up banking less cash in the bank. And each agent should be a confident enough salesperson / professional to be able to explain those in specific numbers, so that that seller really has enough information that they are educated to make the right choice, and therefore get the best price.
Why do you think, or you may not even think this, by the way, but my question would be, why is it prevalent that, I mean, if you take my area, for example, there's 178 properties that are currently on the market and have been longer than 30 days, and then there's no offers coming in. I think it's 141 of those have been on the market for over 100 days and still nothing happening. But why is that? Why does that happen, in your opinion?
How long's a piece of string? So one, taking on sales from unmotivated sellers. If your seller is not actually that motivated to sell, then it's a business decision, I've always thought, whether you take that on or not. Now, my view is always, I want properties to come on the market that I'm going to sell, that are going to complete within a reasonable timescale, so I'm going to get my cash. My old boss used to say, listings are vanity, selling's a sanity, sales are sanity. So I think that's part of it, unmotivated sellers. I think overvaluing, I don't have a problem with overvaluing, which people may argue with me about. But at the end of the day, if I was selling, I'd want to feel really sure I'd done my best to get my best price. And I think what we sometimes think of overvaluing is, oh, it's the seller doesn't know what they're doing, or the agent's just doing it to get the listing. But actually, there's so many reasons behind it. And really, if I look at it really deep down personally, nobody wants that feeling of I sold it too quick, I could have got more. So I've got no problem with overvaluing as long as it's done with a very, very strict and focused process that we know that we've got to test it at this price. If nothing happens, we've got to adjust it. But I'm making you, Mr. Seller, feel really confident that I've done my absolute best to work with you to get the best price. So I think overvaluing is an issue, but it's not just that. It's the fact that there's no strategy behind that. There's no real advice and guidance to the seller to say, look, I really get it. I know you want to try your best. But if I, speak to my buyer network or I put my social media out or Rightmove to swear a little on the platform, then that's not going to get you the best. That's not going to get you the best price. So I need to know that I manage all those things effectively, and then I will get you the best price. You have to trust me as your agent.
And I love that. And in my experience, that is absolutely exactly what happens. And that's the problem, is that there is no process or methodology or anything that a seller is able to hang their hat on to say to the agent, well, you said this.
Yes. Yeah. And we need to be confident doing that, because we are, if we want to be classed as professionals, we have to dig our heels in and offer advice. And sometimes the seller might not want to hear that, but equally we need to hear them, And I've too many times in my career have I heard a lister come back and say, oh, that seller doesn't know what he's talking about, he wants too much money. And my argument has always been, you didn't do your job right. If you really couldn't explain the whole process that you're going through and why perhaps your competitors advertised this price or suggested this price, and these statistics back up what his policy is, he is putting them on high and he's reducing. That's fine, Mr. Seller, if you want to do that, but what are you trying to achieve? If you want to sell quickly, or you've got a real plan on where you want to go and you've found the property, you haven't got the luxury of testing the market. You need to get it right first time. And I think a lot of it is we've lost the art of questioning. And it's the biggest thing for me. I don't really care about training people to sell. I don't want to train salespeople and enable agents. That's not my job. But what I need to train people to do on Able Agent is to be proper experts at what they do. And the nature of excellent questioning means you understand your seller. You understand their urgency or lack of. You understand, their property and the material information impact and all of that. You have to understand that, because that's being a professional. And then you've got a much, much better chance of selling quickly. So for me, it really is about questioning, because if I get that questioning bit right at the beginning and I really understand my seller, I just have to ask for the business. I don't have to have techniques. I don't have to overcome objections. I don't have to be trained in clever methods. I hate clever methods of sale, because no one's ever going to sell me anything with a clever method of sale, And I bought a car recently. I bought a new car, and I told the car dealership, just before you go into your full patter, I teach people to sell for a living. So just don't bother with your banter. And it was brilliant. They cut right through the rubbish. I was going to say crap then, but I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your
You are, you absolutely are.
he cut through the crap, and he gave me a phenomenal deal. But he recognized that if he got the deal right, I signed up there and then, and I did. And I'd walked out of a competitor garage frustrated that they didn't want to sell to me. But I don't want clever sales techniques. I want them to understand me and get me what I want. And I think sometimes it's as simple as that. Understand what the seller needs, understand what the buyer wants, cut through the crap and just deliver that. And that's your priority as a good professional agent.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I did when I first started doing the valuations and becoming a sales manager. It was not knowing the right questions to ask, or even sometimes questions that bordering on being a statement. For example, Tom Panos, when I started listening to Million Dollar Agent, when I first got into agency, that was recommended to me, and that's what I was listening to. And he used to do his 60-second snippets. One of the things he said was property's not in isolation, it's in competition.
Yeah,
And so I
absolutely.
always remembered that. And it was one of those things that suddenly I started thinking, hang on a moment. And then an economist doing an economics degree said to me, John, have you ever heard of the anchoring effect? Basically, we rely too heavily on the first piece of information we're told, which is generally quite high. So I was like,
Yeah.
oh, so I started to piece all of this together. And one of the things I'd say to a seller is like talking about the question and trying to get them to understand that you cannot just muck around when you go to sell your house because you don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
Mr. or Mrs. Seller, would you agree with me that your property is not in isolation? And I say because you could name any money you want, to your point
Yeah.
earlier, but in fact you've got
Yeah.
competition from maybe
Yeah.
properties about to come to market on your road,
Absolutely.
other in the
Absolutely.
postcode, etc. And one of the
Mhm.
things that I would ask when I got the agreement, I'd say, right now, if we're using the 3 bedroom scenario, there are 15 other
Yeah.
3 bedrooms just like yours in this location. This is what I'm marketing them for and selling them at. This is what the other agents are
Yeah.
marketing for and selling at. And
Yeah.
they're like, okay, cool. And I say, yeah, but the surrounding postcodes within the 2 mile radius, it takes it over 300. So
Yeah, I
what are
know.
you going to do to attract all the very best buyers away from what they're currently looking at to come and see yours instead
Yeah, absolutely.
and keep your mouth shut?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think it is that putting them in a position where they really think about it because most sellers, they've got an idea what they want to achieve. And I've had, my sister sold a house years and years ago and it stuck with me because she said to me, the valuer came out. She said they overvalued the property. I knew my house wasn't worth that. And she just lost all respect.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem. I think respect is really, really important. And I think if we still maintain this sales technique mentality and we don't adopt a professional mentality, then that's what we're going to continue to breed, salespeople like that. And actually, I think there's also a north-south divide in this quite a lot. Because I've worked in all sorts of areas, but the north, we're very female orientated as estate agents in the north. And it's a different approach to relationship building when a woman has a sales conversation than a male having a sales conversation, because women will look at it in the same way the female buyer often is looking at it, or the female seller is looking at it from a slightly more emotional perspective. And maybe I'm not allowed to say these things nowadays, but I think we are fundamentally a bit more emotional about these things. And I think the agents in the north, particularly where I work, they really get into a conversation and a relationship. The relationship they build with their potential clients is the strength. It really, really is. And that's why you see so much repeat business coming around in this region that I'm not sure you see as much in the south, because perhaps there's just that different approach to the process. But the estate agents in north, east, south, they are like different. They're like chalk and cheese.
Okay, so before we go on to the second half of the show, apply to work with me. I'm not building a team, I'm building a small army. 9 elite agents, all within 5 miles of Marlow, all under EXP. This isn't for dabblers, this is for people who are dead serious, stoic, disciplined, relentless, the kind of people who live by a code where your reputation means more to you than any commission check. You will need 6 to 9 months of financial runway. There's no fluff, no promises, just war. We train hard, we fight harder. You'll get my time, my systems, my strategy. You'll become a dominant force in your patch and part of something much bigger. This is a movement to destroy the rot in this industry, the overvaluing, the locking contracts, the greed, the lies. The charlatans will not know what's hit them. So here's your call to action. If this hit you in the gut, reach out, DM me, email me, but only if you're ready to go to war. My old bosses, when I did suffer, they said to me, John, stop going for the first sale. You want
Yeah,
to go for the second sale, not the first. Because if you win it first time, you're winning it
yeah,
for all the right reasons, and
yeah,
the perfect scenario is going to happen. You set the tone early the right way. If you
yeah,
don't win it first time, that is brilliant. Why? Because let another agent. Hopefully
yeah,
it works, but more often than not, it's not going to work at what they're saying because it's transactional.
yeah.
Whereas you're building relationships, just keep the door open. And
So,
I was gobsmacked because that was
yeah,
actually an owner of a business telling
yeah,
me
yeah.
that's what the KPI was.
But then to a degree, is that a bit old-fashioned now, though, to challenge you on that? Because actually, I think most properties sellers don't change as much as they used to. They're much more, I think they're much more sort of set in their ways because they just think, well, it's all on Rightmove, so what difference is there? So there's less movement, because I know I saw a stat from Chris Watkin, and I'm sure the number of it being the second agent that sells had reduced dramatically from sort of the times that I looked at previously, when it was about 50 odd percent were sold by the second agent. I'd be interested to see what the updated stats are now on that.
Mm.
Because I think with the market we've been in, we haven't needed a second agent, but that hasn't meant we've been expert estate agents, because actually we've had so much competition. It has been relatively easy to sell. But again, this comes to different regions. I'm based in the Northeast. We are having a boom at the moment. We're the only place in the country, prices are going up. But we've had years where it's been a really, really tough market. So we learn different skills in this patch. You
Mm.
have to relationship build, you have to cross sell, you have to, walk the streets and generate business, you have to network.
Yeah.
And I think the pandemic has created a different level of skill set within the industry. And I think agents, from my point of view as a training business, agents are starting to realize that. And what they're realizing is there's a lot of tech out there that will support them. And they want to invest in the good quality people, and they want them to stay. And they also want to attract the right people.
Mm.
And the younger generation now, they're very picky about what they want to do. They want work-life balance. They want letters after their name. They want clear training opportunities. They want progression. And I think coming back to the piece when I posted on Facebook where we found each other, it's got to be an attractive industry to come into, because if we're only earning minimum wage, you've got to enjoy it, and it's got to be a nice environment, or you're coming for the money. Well, if you're coming for the money, you're probably going to be disappointed unless you look at the self-employed models. But you can't do that when you first start out. You need experience. I
Mm.
don't believe any of these self-employed models are any good if you haven't got experience. I think you need experience. And after that, fill your boots, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. Absolutely.
but before that, if you haven't got experience, then I think when people won't know this about me, but I set up one of the first ever home worker networks when I worked at Pattinson's in the 90s, 2000. We had a home worker network before anyone even thought about it. It's called the Home Worker Network. Keith and Caroline have always been really, really innovative. And the Home Worker Network, and I had lots of ex-policemen who wanted to be estate agents and mums who wanted to be estate agents. And the mistake we made then is they didn't have experience, so they didn't understand the sales mentality that you need as an agent. It's a sales role, albeit I would say you don't have to be a sales skills, you have to be an expert. But
Mm.
it is a sales role. Whatever way you look at it, you've got to generate business, and
Yeah.
that's a difference.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, look, you've been in and around sales pretty much for most of your career. You've been
Yeah,
agency sales manager, for example, sales manager at Knight Frank. You
yeah,
just
yeah,
mentioned the guys that you're working with there. Where does
yeah.
the passion come from, Charlotte? Because of course you've been,
I love it.
running Able Agent now, what, for the last 7, 8 years?
Yeah, well, it's about 5 years we've been live, and about a year and a half before that I juggled it alongside other things to build the content, because obviously we have we have so much content. I mean, we support people like TPFG, and most of the content they use for their training we is ours. So you can tell by the fact that we support a network like that, we have a lot of content. Whether you want to learn about property structure or agency management or listing or negotiating, we've got it all on there. So the passion, I think, came from, I remember the first day I worked, because I got my job at Pattinson's because I met Keith Pattinson at a party. I'd had a few drinks. I was a bit cheeky, and he offered me a job. And I went in the following week, and it was supposed to be a part-time job. It was supposed to tide me over after I'd finished my languages degree. I'm fluent in French and Spanish, so I'd left my degree and did that job. And I was hooked. I just loved it. I loved the people. I loved the fact that I wasn't stuck behind a desk. I loved going out and about. And then a few years later, my husband left me. And I was on my own with a 3-year-old and a six months old. And I'd been working at Knight Frank before that. And I thought, I can't go back to Knight Frank. It's just not the environment I wanted to work in. And I rang up Keith again and explained that Neil, who he knew because he used to employ him years before, had walked out on me. And he said, right, whatever job you want to do, whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, you just do it. And he was brilliant. And I just got involved in the training side of things. I ran the home worker network. I just got my fingers stuck in all sorts of different pies. And I think that environment that I learned in, that didn't ever restrict your creativity, was absolutely phenomenal because, you know, one week I was a negotiator, the next I was a manager, then I was head of property management, then I got headhunted to work for what was Solex Homeview, but is now Vibra, and I was a regional sales manager for them. So then I was on the road speaking to agents, and I love agents. I love them, honestly. You never have a dull day in a business when you're working with estate and letting agents because I just really enjoy the people. You know, I think that's the bit that probably gives me the biggest joy. And then ultimately, I suppose it comes down to Able Agent. Why did we start that? Because I just felt that the training in the industry wasn't fit for purpose. Bluntly, I think that at the time, the property market qualifications, the big, huge manual that used to be dumped on people's desks, and here you go and get a qualification. I didn't like that because people used to fail it. It didn't represent people's real skills. And fundamentally, it wasn't about business generation. And if I'm an agent, why on earth am I training a salesperson in law without also training them in sales? So I felt very strongly that to be a good estate or letting agent, you need to be really, really skilled at the law, but you need to be really skilled at business generation and fee earning. So we were the first company that combined those two things. And then I think online learning was just something that felt like the next step because agents like cheap. They don't want to spend a lot of money on training, if I'm being really brutal, because they worry that if they train somebody up, they'll lose them. But the reality nowadays is if you don't train them up, you lose them. And I felt very strongly that we wanted to create something affordable that met the brief for the agents, that gave them something that didn't feel like they were having to book a hotel room for a day and then travel staff up and down the country and cost them thousands to do it. I thought for 100 quid a month, or we launched at 75, we're now 125 quid a month for your staff in a branch. That wasn't an awful lot of money to give them all the training they needed. And that was kind of where it came from, sort of helping agents and recognizing what I wished I'd known when I was working.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are people that have a heart of gold that get into it for all the right reasons, but then end up failing because they may have some numbers and letters behind their signature, but they don't have then the human side, the professionalism, actually the questions, the information, the knowledge.
Yeah. And you need to be able to sell. You do. You need to be able to spot opportunities. You need to understand the signals when somebody's telling you their story. But I'm a great believer in when you're an agent, you do it because you love property and you love people, predominantly people. And normally when those buying signals come, if you ask the questions in the right way, those buying signals come, we are naturally programmed to solve that. That's the bit I don't need to train people in, because if you know the job, you're naturally programmed. But if you don't get that information, your natural programming doesn't kick in. So I think that one of the things that we can solve really easily is get the information, and then your natural skill kicks in. And then the next bit about training was, you know, I used to worry. So I was put in charge of this property management team. We had 1,000 properties under management, a massive restructure of the department, and nobody really trained me. I did my ALA exams when they weren't ALA, when I had to go off to a special room, and I can't remember what they were called back then, but I did my ALA exams. And I still came out with questions, you know. And we had this one guy called George who I used to be in his office every 5 minutes. George, this has happened. George, that's happened. George, one of the tenants has set fire to the house. George, the tenant set fire to another house. True story. And I spent my life not really knowing where to go to get help. And I thought, you know what? I really want to be, you know, Chris Watkin always talks about his legacy to the industry. If I was leaving one legacy, it would be that I get so many calls from people who say to me, I did your training. It's given me so much more confidence. I had one lady who rang up and she said, I've got the qualification. I've passed it. She said, I didn't pass any exams at school. She was overwhelmed with excitement that she'd passed this qualification. She said, I've joined LinkedIn. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, I never felt professional enough to be on LinkedIn, you know, and it was those sorts of things. You know, you've impacted someone's life, which sounds really cheesy. But if I can help a business owner have a secure team who do good business and do well, and I can have a salesperson that feels supported and has a resource, that means that they're not going home at night stressing. Because I used to go home at night stressing, haven't hit my targets, don't know what to do. I remember asking my boss, a different boss, not the estate agency, when I was in sales for Vibra, before Vibra, I remember saying, I'm not hitting my target, what do I do? And they just said, keep doing what you're doing. And I remember thinking, that's not enough. I need help. I need someone to give me some ideas, you know. And I felt very let down at that point, and then ended up leaving the job. because I didn't really know how to do it well. And
Yeah.
I'm a great believer that you need to be taught how to do things well.
Absolutely. All about process. I completely agree with that. When I first got into the industry back in 2005, it was like, there's your applicant box, there's a phone.
Yeah.
Get on the phone and start making phone calls. And it was like, huh? What do you mean? And I was asking all my colleagues, and of course my colleagues were like, well, I'm not giving you that information. I'm not telling you how I'm getting offers.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a north-south divide because there was a lot more team commissions, not necessarily in my company, but you'd have worked together a bit more. But yeah, that's definitely a north-south divide. But I remember going into the office, and the manager of the branch, or he just turned around to me and said, "Can you do the sales checks?" I said, "You are the sales checks." I said, what do you mean? Well, just ring the solicitor and find out how the sale's going on. And I literally, no word of a lie, picked the phone up and went, "Hello, Mr. Solicitor. Could you please tell me how the sale's going along?" all this information was thrown at me, and I'm thinking, came off the phone like white as a sheet because I'd got a clue what they'd said to me. And I'm not one of those learners. I'm quite bright, I would say. I'm quite business savvy, but it's not first hearing. I do not get stuff first time around. If you put me in aerobics class and tell me to go left, I'm facing the opposite direction. I don't pick things up straight away. I need reinforcement. I need help. I need guidance. Once I've got it, I'm absolutely off. So I really understand that not every learner is the same. And I think you really need to be guided. And I think one of the reasons people leave their job quite early in their career in agency is lack of confidence. And the one thing training can do is give confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Charlotte Jeffrey-Campbell, thank you so much for agreeing to coming on this. And I love your passion, your ideas, your methodology, your process. And yeah, you're certainly speaking to the converted 100%.
Lovely. Thank you for having me, John.
Massive thanks to Charlotte Jeffrey-Campbell for joining me today. Now, if there's one thing to take away from this episode, it's that professional estate agents aren't defined by slick sales scripts. They're defined by how well they educate, question, and support their clients through the process. And if you want to go deeper into the themes we talked about, overvaluation, seller motivation, and how proper training builds confidence and results, head over to zerobsestateagency.com, where I've written a full breakdown of this conversation. And remember, it's not just about getting the listing, it's about getting the result. I'm John Savage, thanks for listening. And don't forget to rate, subscribe, and share this episode with an agent who needs to hear it.